contractors, HVAC sales guys. How is your digital shadow, also known as your digital footprint? So a brand's digital footprint is the sum of all online activities and interactions related to the brand, including its website, social media, any other content, and owned media channels. It is also known as your digital shadow. So welcome to a special live edition of the Engineers HVAC podcast, where our mission is to empower and educate the HVAC community. And to fight the bad digital shadows, I have a VIP, excuse me. There you go. Screwed it up right off the bat. VIP guest. Don't say those two words together. You'll get the word I just said. Chris Lolini, who's the Reputation Igniter. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing great, Tony. Thanks for having me on, buddy. I really appreciate it.
Good. I appreciate it. So if you're bored, it's Friday afternoon, you're sitting around and you're like, I don't know if I could do any more work. Just sit, just chill, just relax, man. We're going to fill you with some, hopefully some knowledge here. So, the theme here we're going to talk about, and Chris is a specialist in this area, is, your online reputation, right? So here's the way I kind of look at this. Okay. When I go to buy something, or when I go to work with somebody, or if we're looking to hire somebody or whatever, right? We're looking to partner with a consultant. The first thing I do is I go and look them up online. What's their website look like? Do they have Google reviews? How is their LinkedIn profile? And I may even look at some other social media. For some reason, me, and I think the rest of the world, don't think that happens to them. when people, you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
Isn't that true? Like we don't think we get snooped, but we do. Like, so it's so super important, the online, and I was a guest on Chris's podcast, so we'll probably reference a lot of that, but we had a great conversation about, like, I'm really starting to understand in the marketing world how important your online position is. We referenced a digital shadow in the beginning. Actually, I looked that up earlier. I never heard that before. I usually call it a digital footprint. And another name for reputation today is your brand, right? We hear that. For some reason, it switched from your personal reputation or your company's reputation to your company's brand. I think from my vintage, or like as long as I've been around, that switched to reputation. It was reputation, now it's brand. Yeah. So Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and what are your thoughts on the opening kind of statement there?
Yeah, I love it. First, again, thanks, Tony, for being on. Looking forward to adding some value to your audience, however I can. So we'll do Reader's Digest version. I'm a recovering engineer. So for all you engineers listening, understand that I was there. I was fortunate enough to serve in the United States Navy for 7.5 years active duty, 15 in total. I was a nuclear engineer there, came out. I was a marine engineer building Washington State ferries up in Seattle. And I just somehow got just fixated on online marketing, and I started a full service agency, and in true transparency, probably didn't know what the heck I was doing, but, kind of failed my way forward and, built a successful agency, about 2.5 years in, shifted that towards focusing on one specific area of digital marketing, which was online reviews, scaled up pretty much a subscription base for the last 5, 6, 7 years. And then recently in the last 3 years, I've really been focusing on just helping specifically HVAC contractors, more so on the residential side than the commercial side, but a lot of these principles apply in both arenas. And the focus shifted from just reviews, which is more kind of like the way I break it up is there's the conversion aspect and then there's the visibility aspect, right? Like you're talking about, right? What are the trust factors that people are seeing online? And usually that comes down to some sort of online review platform or a place where they can get, honest feedback from previous users, previous customers, clients, whatever you want to kind of call it, right? And there's just different areas that you can go search that on. It could be something as, sort of crazy as like Reddit, or it could be something as substantial as like a Google business profile, right? And so for me now, what I do for the residential side is I focus solely on number one, obviously making sure that they've got a good reputation online, but secondly is the visibility, because with just the way that Google search has kind of evolved, and especially Google Maps in the last 3 years, it takes a lot more to rank your Google business profile throughout your service area. And so that's where we focus on. So I like the idea of talking about that digital shadow. And when you initially said shadow, where my mind went, and I don't know if any of our listeners read anything from Robert Greene, but I finished his human laws. Yeah, nature's laws or human's laws. I don't know. So one of his books recently, and it's talking about human nature and the laws of human nature. And he talks about, the shadow self, right? Like the dark self that like you have to like kind of wrestle and subdue, but also kind of integrate into yourself. Which I know, as I was going like,
we're getting deep here now.
It's like, I know you told everybody to relax on Friday.
I thought we were HVAC guys. What's happening here?
We're gonna go into some deep philosophical debate here, but no, you're right. I mean, if you think about it, though, anybody that's making outreach, reaching out on a first sort of connection point, right? There it is. I swear it was going to come in. We got the pops and the thumbs up. So
I like that.
If you're reaching out first, for whatever reason, right? People are always going to do background checks, if you want to kind of call it that. But it's more that, and I think I'd like to say it's not because people are more skeptical or there's been more like negativity and just as a whole, as a culture, we're going down a very bad place, right? But let's talk about the fact that I think it's just because the information's there. Why wouldn't you access it? Why wouldn't you inform yourself, right? Like that's what people want to be, is they want to be informed, and they want to be informed as best possible by, unbiased sources, right? And so I think it's just an easy way for people to collect data points to just give them a better feeling of who you are. And to, what we were talking about on my podcast, the importance of social media as a tool to show yourself in true colors and in your element, as opposed to, in some, very rigid sort of sales conversation. It's a much more sort of like casual and informal way to convey, where your true heart is, and, whether you really do want to serve the community, or you're just looking for a quick buck, and, you give out tail light guarantees that, when they stop seeing your tail lights, that's when your warranty ends, kind of thing. Right. So
that's good. So let's start with the easiest low-hanging fruit for someone who may not be on any social, right? I'm trying to bring the most value we can to our guests. So mechanical engineers, mechanical contractors, really any business, right? Like you said, it doesn't matter if all the principles apply, right? So the low-hanging fruit is almost everybody has a business address on Google. Right? And not everybody knows. If you don't know this, go check it out, that you can get reviewed on Google, and you're kind of stuck with what you get. I don't know. Maybe you're the expert on that. But the low hanging fruit, I think, is, well, there's actually a stage before that. I think we discovered this when we were talking. The stage before that is, don't do anything to damage yourself online. That's like the first. Are you doing something online that's damaging you, or do you have employees that are doing something online that's damaging you? To me, that's like the first step. Wipe that, get rid of that, because I've seen people on social media who work for companies that are doing stuff, and I'm like, ooh, if that guy worked for me, they're talking about things that aren't very ethical, right? So we've all seen it. I'm not going to go into any examples, but so that's the first step. Or is your website just so dated and so bad that it's like no one's going to hire you? If let's say you're a digital marketing guy, but your website's from like the 80s, or you got like a yahoo.com email address or something like that, you'd be like, I'm not sure. So that first step is like, get out of the embarrassment stage. Then you take it from there. Like then the minimum is Google address. And how does that work with the Google reviews and everything?
Yeah, so we'll kind of keep this pretty simple and straightforward, right? Like to your point, if you have a business, Google has most likely built a Google business profile for you, right? And the reason is because data aggregators, are constantly, pulling information from public records, and they're just trying to think about it. It always comes down to making sure that whatever they're providing is the best for their users, right? So Google is just trying to provide the best search results so that people keep, so that they maintain their 92% of the world's search share, right? So they want to provide the best information. So how do they do that? Is they're accessing data sources every data source they can to possibly, create the best sort of, metaverse, I guess, if you want to call it that, online of what's like actually in reality. So if you go Google your business, theoretically, you should probably see a Google business profile. Now, if you're in the commercial side, I would imagine there's probably not many reviews. If there are, it's probably less than 5. And don't be shocked if you've got like a 3-star rating, because usually what happens is the people who are motivated to go and leave those reviews are typically negative people, right? Because most likely, and this is what I see typically in the commercial row, is like, nobody has any system or process in place to solicit positive feedback and make it really easy for somebody
Right.
to leave
So
that
it's
feedback.
skewed negative because of, and I just wanted to add this. When I was in
Yeah.
college, I worked in restaurants, and there was a thing in the back, and it said something, I'm going to butcher this, but something like, people who get good service are likely to tell one person, people who get bad service are likely to tell 15 people or something. It's very skewed. So go ahead. I wanted to just interject that. So
No, you're
it
totally
reminds me of the
right.
importance of customer service is what I'm trying to say.
Well, think about it. When somebody goes, "Hey, how was your day?" Like, what's your propensity to go and tell all the positive things, right? Because then it's like, well, then they're gonna think I'm so important or self-important. It's like you got to go to the negative, like, oh, my life's so tough, and this, that, and the other thing, right? So, like, people love to talk about the crummy situations that they had, right? And so with that bias, you have to kind of, to offset it, you got to do a little bit more work, right? And the most important thing is making that easy, right? So even if you're a commercial, contractor, it's an easy thing to just either have your salespeople or maybe your operations or whoever is most customer facing and is building the strongest customer relationships, to just kind of ask them, hey, how was your experience? Would you mind sharing that online and making it easy, getting a link to your Google Business Profile, reviews?
Is that the easiest way to do it? Is give them an easy link to the reviews where they could just go in and do the review?
Yep, absolutely. And there's a way to kind of build that out. So if somebody is because there's a specific URL structure that you need to create, and it's best to do one, not the one that Google actually gives you, but building it out with the place ID so that it doesn't get broken. Because oftentimes that's what happens is the URL will break, and the one that Google gives you on your Google Business Profile, for whatever reason, we've just found over the years that sometimes those reviews, although the consumer who posted the review will see it, the business won't actually see it for whatever reason. So so there are some nuances to that, and that usually includes your place ID, which is a whole bunch of gobbledygook after google.com/company/write a review kind of thing, right? And so, making it easy for your customer to do it, making sure that you're doing it at a point that makes sense, right? After they just, you just sold them something, probably not the best time after you first deliver, maybe the first deliverable, or, you've had your first interaction, something where they're excited. That's usually the most important piece, is that positivity. But, Tony, if I may, maybe we switch tracks in the sense that we kind of address why would somebody care, right? Why would a mechanical contractor care? Why would a salesperson care? Well, you have to understand, if you're a salesperson, reaching out on behalf of a commercial company, right? They don't know you, right? You're just another guy that dropped into their inbox, dropped by the office, phone call, whatever, right? The first thing they're going to do is they want to put a face, and by that I mean a company face, to that phone, that person on the other end of the phone, or who showed up, right? They want to understand, are you a legitimate business first and foremost, right? We feel like there's an never-ending, amount of scams out there, right? So we want to just verify that you're a legitimate business. Well, to your point, Tony, easiest way to do that, have a good reputable website that obviously, showcases your portfolio, other jobs that you've done, other work that you've done, right? So that people can have quick confidence in oh, okay, well, they provide a quality product. Well, then if you're the salesperson or you're the actual mechanical contractor, I would think that LinkedIn is a pretty important platform for you, right? So make sure that you've got a good LinkedIn profile that, talks about how you got into the trade, why you love the trade, what you're doing in the trade, right? If it's just got your high school that you went to, it's not as reassuring, right? So build out where somebody's going to go find you, which is going to be a professional place like your LinkedIn profile. They're not going to go to Facebook. They probably wouldn't want to go to Facebook. Then they find out who you really were. No, I'm just kidding. But the idea there is that at least they could understand who your professional persona is, so they can get a better idea of who you are, why you're trying to help them. And then behind that is, the LinkedIn profile page for the business, and making sure that is well, filled out to give confidence and trust and feel like you're being open and honest about who you are, who you work with, and the experiences that others have had in the past with you, right? So
I love it. Yeah, it's so funny. We just did an internal modular training for all of our employees at all of our brands on the LinkedIn profile, the importance of it. It's a 10-step go through, and and it really doesn't take that much time to make your profile look good. And I'll tell you, if you're a business, there's endless content. What are you doing today? Take a picture of what you're doing. You did this call, you built this thing, whatever it is, you're shipping this product, whatever it is, and just throw it on there and say a few words of thanks. And it's just something people can look at and go, oh, they're doing this. This is nice. Or if you get a good review from Google, take a snapshot of it, and you do it right from your phone. And I would say the profile picture is like, we have this conversation all the time. If your profile picture is you at the helm of your boat, with a beer in your hand, it's probably not the you probably made a mistake there. So, and you could get, a lot of people don't know, the best, all you could do a selfie with these phones today that look phenomenal and put it up there. You don't go to a studio or don't hire a professional photographer. We have this conversation a lot too. So I guess my point is, like, you could do it super easy. And if you want to learn how to update your LinkedIn profile, there's this new website called Google and how to update my LinkedIn profile, right? And you'll get a billion different videos on it. So
arguably, you just go to ChatGPT and say, ChatGPT, update my profile, right?
Do that too, for sure.
The other thing to that, Tony, that I didn't even think about, right? But as we're talking, I love the free flow of ideas that you and I have, right? Is, let's say that you are a salesperson or you're a mechanical contractor engineer out there, right? Guys, this is so easy. You don't necessarily need someone to go to Google and write a review on Google, right? If you are interacting, having relationships with new accounts, right, and they're going and checking out your profile, why aren't you updating them on the status and the progress of the projects that you're on already, right? Why aren't you just sharing in kind of a documentary type way how you're solving common issues, right? Because what somebody who you're trying to do business with now can do is they can go look at your profile and be like, wow, they solved this, airflow issue, or they solved this, intricate, complex refrigerant issue, or, and not only that, but I mean, all that is like trending content. But it's a way for them, in a way, to go, man, this guy's a solution seeker, a problem solver. And they kind of buy in more so to anything, to like your ethos and how you sort of approach things. And I mean, with all the problems you guys are solving on a daily basis, you could have an endless, nonstop sort of just litany of all the stuff. Like, sometimes I think we take it so for granted, all the problems you're solving on a daily basis. Now, I'm not obviously telling you to like air the dirty laundry of your projects, but I'm talking about, hey, how about all the collaboration that you're having with your accounts and how you're solving those problems? Why not bring that to showcase? That's an easy way, I think, to demonstrate how you operate when you're in a relationship, a business relationship with somebody.
100%. So there's a phrase, you've heard this, I'm sure: document, don't create.
I was like, what am I trying? There's a phrase or a word that I was trying to look for. So yeah, absolutely.
That's right. I stole that from Gary Vee, but
yeah, I was going to say, thanks to Gary Vee.
That's right. It's so true. But before I got on live here, I went through 10 steps, little clip videos, 15 seconds. Hey, we're about to go live on LinkedIn. Here's what we're doing. And then I'd say, here's the camera we use. Here's the program we use. As a matter of fact, while you were talking, it reminded me to record a little bit while we were actually live. So I was doing this with my phone on here, but I'm just documenting it, putting it up on stories. Then I'll turn that into a reel and a video later this evening when I'm just sitting around. But it's like all the things we do during the day, especially if you're like a manufacturer or contractor, you're on the site. Hey, we're out here, get permission, of course, got this old unit. Here's what we typically look for. Here's what we do. I suggested this client 3 options because everyone's got their budget and their time and stuff like that. So it's just like, it shows your care and it shows what you're doing. And you don't have to sit down and script anything or create anything. Like Chris and I are talking here. We have a topic, right? Yep. How important is your online reputation? And we're going to talk about our experience with that. So, yeah.
I love that too, because I think also if you're in the manufacturing process, man, like just poking your head in and showing like how you're manufacturing some of the stuff that's getting delivered to your customers, like they love that stuff. Like, and this, maybe this is just the engineer in me, but I totally love learning how the sausage is made, because I just like, I want to know like the thought process behind like what you're building. And my team, right? I mean, they hate and they love me because I'm always asking questions. Like I've hired people way smarter than me to actually execute on the strategies and the stuff that we've developed and we execute, right? I'm the face of the company. I do the sales and I do the client support, right? But the team behind me, I mean, just like decades of knowledge on everything, sort of Google Maps, right? And so I'm always asking them, okay, yeah, but like I like to play devil's advocate, and I go, okay, what about this situation? What about this situation? Okay, why do we do that? How is that actually shown, to be good, or have an impact, or why does Google care, and all this kind of stuff. And so, because I want to be able to articulate that effectively to a client. Now, I do it at a different level. I don't speak like the marketing nerd speak that we all speak together, as a team. I want to speak the higher level, problem solving, results delivering but I need to know why we're doing that, right? And that's an easy
Right.
comment of saying like, hey, we're the only actual manufacturer in, the Eastern United States that actually manufactures this with a special water jet cutting, technology,
Yep.
so that we don't have any rough edges and everything is actually temperature cooled at the right, level, so that we don't get any, thermal stresses or fractures, later on in the actual process when the building is, going through the initial heat up cycle. You know what I mean? Like that
100%.
was a little nerd talk from like the nuclear days, but like
No, I
that's
get
what I'm
it.
saying is that sounds sexy, because now somebody might not have understood half of what you said when you said it to them, but you're like, dude, these guys do things differently than my last manufacturer. I'm more interested in talking to them because I feel like they've thought through more things, right? Now,
Right.
you're probably doing the same thing. It's like whole like Coors. Our beer is cold filter. Well, every beer is cold filter, right? But Coors got to say that theirs is cold filter first. So now everybody looks like,
Right.
oh yeah, me too brand, as opposed to you being the leader, right? So anyways, that's just kind of my
So many things came up for me. I mean, like, I'm going to have to put a timer on because I could literally talk about this for hours. But if you're watching, I was reading this comment here, but yeah. So the thing that come up for me is there's something in marketing called the curse of knowledge, which is we think everybody already knows everything about our business, everything that we know, right? So when I go to a factory, I'm like, oh my God, why aren't you showing this stuff? Like, look at this fan. I said, well, everybody knows about a direct drive blend fan. No, they don't.
Nope.
And they usually don't get to see them sitting here out of the unit. So let's go and do a 30-second reel or a 5-minute talk about it. So it's just like the basic stuff. And I was having a conversation very recently with someone in marketing who I respect a lot. And her and I were talking, and so it always comes around to social media with me, because I can't believe the tools today and how a lot of people aren't taking advantage of them. And her thing to me was like, I really want to do more, but I don't know how to do the reel. And I said, I'll tell you exactly how to do it. Okay. Take any 30 seconds of you talking over the last hour and talk that into the camera. And you've got 100 reels right there. Like, it's just that easy. People don't understand. And if you're, the holy grail for equipment, like, I'm bringing this back to HVAC, but like if you're a designer or you're a contractor, whether commercial or residential, and you're near the stuff, you're like living in the design, like you just show a quick clip of it. Here's why we designed the ductwork this way. If you're a mechanical engineer, here's why we piped the cooling tower this way. Here's where we put the isolation valve, etc. Those are like huge online because people want to know, and they're like, oh, it's behind the scenes. So
yeah,
I don't know.
like you said, I think yeah, you just had to put something sexy on it, like behind the scenes, right? I mean, I think every movie now has behind the scenes, footage as their add-on, or the special bonus, right? So like, why don't you, right? Like, somebody figured out that it works. Like, just engage.
That's right. So we moved from not damaging yourself online. Step number 1, do a sweep. Make sure your employees are not doing anything online to embarrass you, and some of them might be, so just check that. Nobody where I work, of course, we're all good with that. So then Google reviews is your next thing. Then we talked about social media. We gave hopefully a few ideas of how to share content, which is super easy. First, get your profiles cleaned up. Like Chris said, LinkedIn's a really good one. I would say YouTube Shorts for the HVAC business is really hot right now. And it's searchable. YouTube, a lot of people don't know this is the second largest search engine in the world. And, I'm YouTube certified on a million different things, right? How to change this, how to change it, whatever. So, YouTube Shorts are real important. Get your profiles up to speed and just start. If you want to build an online presence, and there's 2 facets to that, and I'd love to hear your opinion on it. And I'm realizing this recently, like, one facet is it'll go out and find people.
Yep.
Naturally, because people are just it has a weird way of finding the right people that are interested in your topics, because a person in HVAC might like it, and then it knows, okay, HVAC guys like it, and then he might share it. So you don't even have to you just got to put the content out there. It's all fine. So there's the search and find, and there's also the people who hear about you, like you said, and go look you up. So there's 2. What are your comments on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think, we hear this a lot, these days, like building your own personal brand, right? So, there's nothing better than to bring your LinkedIn profile alive in the sense that, like, if you're working with one manufacturer, right, there's 2 pieces of this. One is if you're working with a certain manufacturer right now, but let's say that you've got grand ambitions and there's another company that you eventually want to work for, right? Why not create all this amazing, great content with the company you're currently with, right? And to Tony's point, somebody's going to find you and be like, dude, I like what this guy or gal is doing for this company. This is incredible. How do we hire people like this? And it's like, well, first, why don't we just try and hire that guy, right? Or that gal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can be brought over, right? It's kind of similar situation, right? I know you've asked to kind of do this, on behalf of the company, right? So there's opportunities. Like, companies are looking for this and they want this in their business. They just don't know who to hire, or because, like, let's be honest, the guy or the gal who started the company is not good at that. They are good at building the business. Like, they
probably not, right? You got to hire the right person.
Yeah, so you can be the right asset in that sort of situation, right? So one of the pieces I would say is, like, you could build your own personal brand around that. I think the other thing that's really cool is, why not spotlight your customer, your client, right? Why not bring them into the fold, right? And ask them questions about the project? Because that's the other thing, is you got to understand, like, especially if you're doing big, like, infrastructure or big development projects like you guys are, right? The actual owners of those projects, like, they did a lot of work to get a lot of buy-in from the city, from the residents, from the community for that project. What if you could give them a lens or a pathway, a light into the project, and understanding more the heart and the soul of the people who are actually putting it to work, putting it together in your community, and what they're trying to eventually deliver as a result. I mean, then you're kind of the hero of your client too. And, like, what client isn't going to, like, what new client isn't going to want to work with you if they feel like, wow, they're actually going to, like, and we're not being manipulative, but, like, they're going to be able to shed some light on real hardworking people that are trying to create something of value in a community. And I just think it's a win-win sort of situation, because then you remove the whole, like, oh, it's that brand. And it's like, yeah, but there's actually people behind that brand, and they actually do care. And they're just like you and me, and they're just trying to put in a good, honest day's work to create something better in the community. And look at them at work, right? Like, they're thinking about these things. They're thinking through these things. This is how they put together the project. This is, I think transparency is so important in our culture and our society today. Like, why not just add to what people want, as opposed to secrecy and not knowing what's going on and all that kind of stuff, right? So last thing I'll say on that point too, Tony, is, like, guys, if there's a holdup in a project and things are getting delayed, instead of letting all the people around it be like, oh yeah, they quit on this thing or whatever, like, why not communicate that to the public? Like, what's going on? And, maybe the thing that held you up is, like, you want to make sure you're passing certain regulatory things, or maybe you just elevated the LEED certification that you're going to have on a building or something like that. Why not communicate that to people and say, hey, we're working through these things, we're collaborating, and it just kind of takes time. I think that openness can just benefit you so much, like, in the longer arc of things. But most people aren't thinking on it in a day-to-day cycle. And like you said, Tony, you just got to stick a camera or a phone in front of your face for 30 seconds to communicate that, if you're willing, right?
Yeah, and I it's funny, because in the HVAC world, I feel like we're behind a little bit. Sure. The times with social media and using these tools and new ways of marketing. B2B in general is behind, but I think we're even a little bit behind the average in B2B. When I think about the people using it right, it's the B2C folks. And a lot of times they're doing it because they don't have any other option. Like, that's the only option. So when your only option is to do it or die as a business, that is, you get out there and do it. But, and the other point I like you made is the HVAC commercial business owner, they're probably not able to do that, or the time-wise not do that. The mechanic guy who runs the mechanical engineering firm. But I tell you, if you got a big company, you probably got someone who maybe they're in their wheelhouse and they may really enjoy it. They may do it and be terrible. You don't know until you try, but you may find a little gem there that, if they're like me, like, it's in my blood, like, I love it. I can't shut it off. Like, I'm totally addicted to it. It's insane. But if you're a big mechanical engineering firm or contractor, you certainly have that person there. And of course, you'd want to vet it with all your safety, your human resources. You want to make sure when you're recording, everybody's got, the safety gear on, and you got permissions and all that kind of stuff in place. But once you have that set up and you have that in place, you can really churn out some content that's that people enjoy watching and can help your firm, like you said, when people snoop you. So let's hit two more things real quick.
Cool.
Websites.
Yep.
What is your opinion on, my thoughts on websites are, you could get a pretty decent one for a relatively, non-insane amount of money today, right?
Yeah.
If you want it to look like the best thing out there, you're going to have to pay for it. It's not cheap because you got to go out and get the content. You want to have some video on there that looks good. That's the most impactful. I look at some and I'm like getting some budgets. I'm like, oh, we could do that for 60,000. I'm like, whoa, no. We'll do this in house. So, it took us a few years. I'm really happy with the Insight Partners website. I think it looks great. The Hobbs one we're about to launch right now, I think that looks great too. We've got some other ones we want to work on. But like, what's your advice to someone who's small to medium size and their website really needs to be updated?
Yeah. Less is more in a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't feel like you got to have a 200-page website. Like most people they don't have time, right? Yeah. I would say that make sure that all the, important information is there. And arguably you could do that in a 1-page website, right? Just kind of walking through, you want to think about it, take the 80-20 from your sales calls, right? Like what's the 20% of information that gets asked 80% of the time, and just answer those questions on your webpage, right? And just walk them through that sort of process. And usually if you think about it, it's a bit of a decision process, right? Like if you go to reputationigniter.com, right, you're going to kind of see my process of educating somebody and explaining and showing results and, the details of that and how we're different and who I am and, what working like with me is like, but it's all on one single page. I don't have a 100-page website, right? I wouldn't expect my clients who are, very, very busy HVAC contractors to actually spend the time, but I've got a couple of videos there that I think are important, right? It's of me talking to, a prospective customer of mine. And I would just invite you, if you're the CEO, the founder, the owner of the company, say something about that. Why not get your operations person, on a video explaining stuff, right? We've become such a video-centric society these days. So like arguably you don't even need to hire a really like lavish copywriter, right? Like I would just, have some intro, like some verbiage, just small verbiage introing a video. And then that video also doesn't have to be super professionally made, right? I mean, I know you've got probably a nice office like Tony does in the background. Just set up a phone, with a decent microphone and just record somebody just talking into the camera as if they're
100%.
talking to a new prospect, wanting to educate them about the uniqueness of their processes and procedures and how they deliver results. I'd have some of your results on there, right? So other projects that you've done, I guess not before and after is like dirt and then all of it in there, right? So, but I mean, maybe some like, sexy pictures of like how you've run ducting in maybe tight spaces, right? Or in large spaces, right? Kind of giving them a smattering of like, hey, it doesn't matter if your project's small or your project's big, right? Just communicating to them your capabilities, a lot more visually than in words, right? Because let's be honest, in the engineering world, when we write website or copy on websites, it's like stereo instructions, man. It just puts you to sleep, right? So if you can be that company that shows things, number one, people are not just going to come to your website. They're going to stay longer, which, is going to be a good thing for Google, right? But number two, they're just going to feel engaged with your business a little bit more than maybe hiding behind a bunch of sterile pictures and a bunch of, unemotional words on that page. Now, you obviously have to have words to kind of articulate what you're trying to educate them about, but a single website page can speak volumes if you've got enough of kind of like the credibility and trust factors. But if you've done different projects and you want to break out a project per page and have a little bit of hey, here's what the problem was, here's what the solution was, do it in the very sort of like engineering style type of process, which has been a long time since I started that in statics freshman year of college. Almost 20 years ago, right? So no, over 20 years ago. And so I think if you just kind of, you do something that simple, it can be helpful. Good colors, like, don't make it hard to read. They don't got to be fancy, crazy fonts. Like I know architecture font's pretty cool, but I'd spare, doing the whole thing in architecture font, maybe just your headers kind of thing. So it doesn't have to be flashy, guys. I think more importantly, it just has to be engaging, right? So that's what I would say there.
That is super advice. I love the one pager. Start with that. A good looking one page is better than a 10-pager that looks like, I'm a big proponent of stock photos. I can't stand them when I see them on a website. The reason it drives me crazy is this is like a better camera than they had in the movie studios, like in the early 90s, right? Like, so there's no excuse. There's literally no excuse to taking a few landscape pictures, some portrait ones. I love when I first see a website and it's like the owners, and maybe there's a couple people that work there, and that's like the first picture you see. Hi, we're so and so, yada yada yada. Here's what we do. Here's what our values are. Here's a few jobs we've done. But you're right. One pager looks good.
And I mean, if you really want to build it out, then build it out around the team, right? Because the team is really the asset that you have, right? And so to your point, having pictures of the founders and stuff, when you have portfolio pictures, like why not have a picture of, one of your team members, like pointing at something in the photo or being involved, having the uniform and all the proper PPE on, right? So that you're communicating like, hey, we are people that, even when the project's finished, we're still wearing the proper protection kind of thing. And then also like, why not just jazz it up with a little bit of life, right? Like each person that works for you is not a robot, right? Like there's certain things that they really geek out about. And it's like, why not bring that to the forefront, right? Like, you have obviously the very professional photo of them, but then down below, maybe there's just a picture of them just being a ham the way they like to be a ham, like whether they crawl into ducting and they literally inspect the integrity of every, like weld screw or something like that. Like if that's just what they do, like, I don't know, bring those people to life off the page too, right? As great as this is to realize, that everybody went to Emory-Riddell and, has an engineering degree, like give them a personality, right? So anyways, that's what I would say.
Love it. And whatever you do on your website, copy that over to your social platforms. 100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great advice. Thank you, Chris. Okay. Real quick. We'll finish up here, 'cause I know you got to go pick up one of your kids, right? Awesome.
Yes,
two and one on the way for Chris. So God bless you. You're in my prayers, my friend. I got 3 teenagers, so I'm well out of that, that stage. It happens quick, that's for sure. So one of the things we get asked, or mechanical engineers, contractors, manufacturers ask us about starting. What's our opinion about starting a podcast? What would you tell someone? Let's say they do have their let's say they got the low-hanging fruit. The podcast is not the low-hanging fruit, in my opinion. It's the website. How's your Google reviews? How's your social landscape look? Then you could talk about what is your opinion on starting a podcast?
It's way more work than you think it is. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
I would say that, I took that on probably about 6 months ago, and I'm still working through my processes and systems around that. You will probably find somebody who's awesome like Tony and can really just connect with people. The easiest part is actually the hour of recording, right? Everything that goes into that beforehand and after is way more work, right?
That's right.
Finding good quality people to interview and have on the show so that you're adding value to your audience is just the tip of the iceberg, right? Then the back end is like, okay, once you record it, then what do you do with it, right? Now all these platforms require different things. You got to have engaging descriptions. You got to have hashtags. You want to make sure that you're disseminating it on the right platforms at the right time in the right quality. You want to like you're talking about YouTube Shorts. So there's like the chopping up and the editing. I will admit that it might make sense to outsource it. I'm probably in the process of I've debated between building out the actual systems with a mentor of mine and him helping me kind of like teach some a couple, somebody I hire to do that versus just hiring somebody that can do that. So that's the other thing too, is realizing you don't have to do everything in house. If you just got one good guy that's a good talking head, has amazing hair like Tony does, then you should be in a good place to actually create that content on a consistent basis. And then you can just hire, somebody else to like professionally publish and do that. So that's the other thing is I wouldn't these days, man, marketing's so complicated. I wouldn't try and bring anything in house that you didn't have to, because there's just a more effective way. But I think you got to come at it from the right perspective of, hey, this is a long-term investment in the business, in the brand, right? Alex Hormozy, when he started on YouTube, he had a 10-year horizon, right? And thinking that like, hey, I don't expect this to pay off for 10 years. Now, his obviously paid off much, much earlier, but he's been doing a tremendous amount of work in order to kind of get it there. But I think you have to look at it with a long-term vision. And I would imagine if you've got a successful company and you're in a place where you're about to invest in something like that, you're planning to be around in 10 years. So it is a good, worthwhile investment for you. But just making sure that you have a good time horizon and realizing that it's really just a way to, number one, add value back to your industry. That's why I started mine, really, in all honesty. Like I don't promote anybody on it in the sense that like I don't have advertisers, I don't have affiliates. Like I'm not trying to make money off of the podcast. It's really just a way to give back to the industry that supports me, my livelihood, because I have clients in the HVAC industry, right? So it's just like, hey, how can I leverage my talents, which are networking with awesome people like Tony, bringing him on, having him share advice and insight and wisdom into certain things, And, on top of that, like Tony mentioned, I got 2 kids and a third one on the way, right? This is my way of networking and connecting with people that I can do from the comfort of my own home, so that I can support my amazing, incredible wife as we raise these 3 kids in a new area. Because we just moved from Seattle 18 months ago, we moved down from Seattle, and now we're in the DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so it's also a great way to just meet really cool people like Tony, who I wouldn't have just like bumped into on the street or at a BNI networking group, because he's, you're a quarter away across the country, right? So
that's right.
I think that's just really fascinating too. Is like you can really accelerate your networking and your connections, especially if you're one of these like bigger, larger mechanical operations that's doing stuff all across the country. It's a great way to just really kind of tighten up your network and really drive home some great connections and relationships. So yeah, that's what I'd say. But after that, it's just get started. It's not going to be pretty at the beginning. You just got to kind of work through it and evolve like Tony and I have.
Yeah, that's my number one thing. People say, I'll talk to them for an hour and they say, I want to get started. I'm just worried it won't look that good. And I'm like, well, I can help you with that. It won't look that good. It shouldn't. It's your first one. You got to do a bunch of them. But excellent advice. I think this was a great show. I agree with everything you said about the podcast. It is a lot of fun to do it, a great networking, but it does take work. It is an investment. And I heard this quote the other day that applies to that. It's something like, slowly is the fastest way to get to where you want to be, right? Like you got to look at it from the long term, because some people will do it. They'll get all excited. They'll post something or they'll do a podcast and they'll get 5 listeners. They'll be like, oh, that was a flop, and they'll be done with it. Well, that's how it is when you start. You got to build up the audience. But Chris, this was amazing. You brought a lot of value, I think, to our audience. I hope you come back sometime. Tell people how they can get a hold of you real quick.
Yeah, I'm really easy. You can obviously go to my website, reputationigniter.com. You can fill out the contact form and connect with me there. Or you can email me, chris@reputationigniter.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm not the only Chris Lolini. There's another doppelganger of mine, but he's way cooler than me. He rides motorcycles out in California. I'm just a marketing nerd. You can tell the difference. I'm pretty sure he's got gray hair and he wears suits. I'm just a regular dude, and I have glasses, I guess. So
we're a couple.
Well, actually, these are prescriptions. So technically, I also do not wear glasses in real life. So if you see me on the street, I might look a little bit different. But yeah,
there you go.
That's where you can reach me. Happy to help in any way I can. Always there. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Appreciate you, Tony, again for having me on.
Thank you, Chris. Please hang out for a minute. Thank you so much for watching. You can get a hold of Chris again in the show notes. If you're listening to this on the podcast, just look at the notes. If you're watching this on YouTube or LinkedIn, I'll put it in the chat. I'll put it in the notes. And please connect with us, with our YouTube channel, HVAC TV, or the Engineers HVAC podcast. And I'll put some stuff up here, and I'll take us out with some music. So thank you so much for listening. Chris, please hang out, and we'll talk in a minute.